started. Oops. So I'm Marissa Fregeau. I am a senior corporate counsel at Aflac. How did I get here? A long 23-year path, as I realized. So I started actually as a social worker slash therapist. I worked with individuals with severe mental disabilities, and then I worked in a nursing home. And I realized that what I it after 8 years, I was very burnt out and I wanted to do something that would support my family. So I went to law school. So, and I knew as an older attorney and having watched my husband try his best in a law firm and not make it, that did not want to be a corporate, or I did not want to be a part of a law firm. And so I went in house right after law school. I was lucky to have been able to do that. I was able to do that because I was an older attorney, and I have been in operations as an operations attorney in house for my entire career.
Thank you. Who wants to go next?
I can. Hi, everyone. My name's Kevin Fritz. He, him. I'm a white man with white glasses and reddish hair. I am an employment lawyer. I've been an employment lawyer since 2013 when I graduated from law school. I have muscular dystrophy, so I use a wheelchair. I went to the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign for my undergrad, and it was during college that I kind of decided to proceed with a law degree because I was trying to really understand more about my rights as a disabled person, but also how to help other people with disabilities. I actually wasn't very aware of the ADA other than it applied to me somehow until I went to law school. And it was during my very first day on campus that I learned about something called employment law and how it impacted the disabled and other populations. For about 10 years, I was a defense litigator at a law firm called Seyfarth Shaw, Seyfarth, and I worked in Chicago. I would go to court regularly. I would go to depositions. I was often mistaken as the plaintiff many times by the judge or the attorneys. So that was a very interesting conversation to have. After about 10 years of working pretty much every day at a big firm, I looked in the mirror one day and said, this is not a good life anymore. I had learned quite a bit, and I was very proud of the work I put in, but it was time for a change for my health. I pivoted my career to the proactive counseling side of employment law and was able to successfully become a counselor and provide counseling. And today I live in beautiful Florida, and I work remotely for a company called Gusto, Gusto. It's a financial tech payroll HR provider for small businesses, and I am their employment counsel. So I advise internal themes on employment practices. And I partner a lot with our product team to help create the HR technology that we give to our customers. And that's my career so far.
This is Marissa. Thanks, Kevin. Okay, who's next?
I'll give it a shot. So, hey, I'm Stuart Pixley. I'm also a white guy, but I've got blue hair, a white beard, and a blue T-shirt. But I guess blue's my theme. So I am senior corporate counsel at Microsoft, and I support our silicon engineering team. So these are the folks that actually design and customize semiconductors for our data centers and our devices. Disability-wise, I have congenital rubella, so a little bit like CP. I use a power wheelchair for mobility. I use hearing aids for communication. So I've been at Microsoft in the Seattle area for over 16 years, and this is the only in-house job I've had. Prior to that, I worked in large law firms for about 11 years, 4 different firms in New York City, Silicon Valley, San Francisco. And my transition to in-house was a little accidental. I had this incredible luck of working for 2 large law firms that collapsed. After the last one collapsed right in 2008, I was looking around, and of course, everyone was talking about things that were too big to fail. I got an offer from Microsoft, and I thought that to take it. And one thing I'll mention is at the time, Microsoft would only interview folks that had been out, let's say, somewhere around 5 to 7 years in law firm life. Now, it fit that. But so there wasn't as many people like Marissa who sort of went straight through. But that's actually changing. So that's something to keep in mind. My current role has sort of been a product of 2 different things. One is I've had a somewhat singular focus, especially since New York, leaving New York. I'm really just focusing on technology transactions principally, and some product and business counsel along with that. So a little bit of focus, but at the same time, within that, I've kind of done all different kind of businesses. I've done both semiconductors, software, e-commerce, a lot of biotech and life sciences. And I've been able to replicate what I did in that regards in private practice, also at Microsoft. One of the great things about working for a super large, very diverse firm. And so, a lot of that, sort of being able to keep something interesting has been also a product of, frankly, just being super curious and, willing to sort of, dive into technologies that I don't know anything about, and more than willing to come up on the learning curve. So that's kind of how I got where I am. So
This is
next.
Marissa. I wonder what could have happened in 2008 that would lead a firm to crash. Okay.
No idea, none.
Okay, Sudha, last but not least.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Sudha Rajan. I lead the digital accessibility team for Optum, which is part of United Health Group. So United Health Group's digital accessibility team. For people who don't know, digital accessibility is the process of making sure that websites, mobile applications, any other digital content is accessible for people with disabilities. So that's my role now. Our team is about 50 people or so from a whole bunch of different industries. It's a great team. I started my career as an attorney, and I practiced business and commercial litigation, kind of mostly corporate defense, a lot of that kind of stuff for, I don't know, all together, maybe 5-ish years, something in there. I worked at a large firm in the Twin Cities area, Minneapolis, St. Paul area, and then at a smaller, really cool kind of startup law firm that was all ex-big law people. And that was great. And then I ended up transitioning into the tech industry through quality assurance or software testing, and then getting into digital accessibility through there. I was on Target's digital accessibility team back in 2014, and they had been working, and this is public record on Wikipedia, so Target had been sued by the National Federation of the Blind, and they had an agreement they were working through, and I came in as a contractor to do testing, but right away I kind of asked my manager, what's up with the settlement agreement? And I ended up looking at it and helping develop a lot of procedures, that kind of stuff. So I started working there full time and getting more into program management. And then I became United Healthcare's first actual digital accessibility director. And then about 3.5 years ago, I started leading a combined United Healthcare and Optum enterprise digital accessibility team. So I'm not an attorney now, and I've never actually been an in-house attorney, but my digital accessibility is very much a compliance area if you're in a healthcare company, and there's also a lot of contractual things. And I would say my law degree has come in very handy in a lot of different ways over the course of my career, though I am always careful to stay in my lane in terms of I'm not the official lawyer in a situation at work. And so I always try to be careful to not kind of overstep, but law degree's been very useful. So I think that's and then description wise, I have light brown skin. I'm wearing glasses that have some gold in them. I have like shoulder length black hair and a black kind of button down shirt on.
Thanks, everybody. This is Marissa. So how does your disability influence the work that you do? And do we want to go in reverse order this time, maybe?
Back to me then, huh?
Back to you.
Okay. I have actually a question. If you want to clarify the question just a little bit more, Marissa, about kind of what you're thinking of when you think about influence. Like, do you mean like, why do we do what we do, or what is our day-to-day work like, or kind of what would you like us to speak to?
So I would say, how does it impact the way you think about your role, the work that you do in your role, the way you navigate your role?
Sure. I will take a first shot at that. So I have a neurological condition that at this point in time is invisible. I'm on medication and I get infusions twice a year that control it. So in terms of how it influences my work, I think as someone who leads the digital accessibility team for United Health Group, the fact that I am arguably I have two different invisible disabilities, really, because I also identify as neurodiverse. But I think for me, I feel like having those invisible disabilities has been really great in that, when I'm leading digital accessibility work, it's not for other people. It's, also for me, like I am part of the community, and I feel very fortunate so I think it helps from kind of an authenticity perspective for me, not that you have to have disabilities to lead the work, but I think that helps for me. I think it's helped with leading my team too, in terms of for me being neurodiverse, I think has made it easier at times for me to understand and relate to and lead and support people on my team who are neurodiverse. I also think too that having an invisible disability puts me in a unique position where when people don't know when they meet me that I have disabilities or that I'm part of the community. And so they might speak to me or work with me in a different way than if they did know that. And so I think sometimes then I get this kind of stealth opportunity to maybe influence people more that I think can be really valuable.
Thank you. Stuart?
Sure. Well, I thought there's actually a couple ways to answer this. First, disability itself isn't part of my practice. From a peer support standpoint, do a lot of work in diversity, and other sorts of things. Although one of the things I was really fortunate to over the course of my career is support Microsoft Research, and a number of teams there were coming up with solutions for a whole variety of disabling conditions. Pretty cool stuff, especially now what's happening with AI. On a different level, it did influence me in the sense that of my interest in technology transactions. one of the things that's really cool for those out there in the audience that are, law students, et cetera, is there's so many different ways to be an attorney, and different sort of practices involve different styles that may match your disability better than others. For me, tech transactions was a great sort of Goldilocks. I felt that the time that I had spent on like large M&A projects were really interesting because you were part of a team, but you can have your days and nights soaked up for like months solid. And that creates a certain amount of stress that works for some people, but doesn't work with others. There's other things which are, I also did like trademark prosecution for a while, which is like a whole lot of small plates spinning at one time. And that's also very doable, but it appeals to someone with a different sort of sense of rhythm. For me, tech transactions was great because, I could act, even as a young attorney, I could run whole transactions all on my own, obviously check in with my manager and folks that I wanted to learn from, but I could do it myself. The number of transactions were sort of at the right size, so I could, manage my workday effectively, et cetera. So, I felt to me that it was also a little bit better fit than some litigation practices, which, can be very hectic at times. Sometimes you feel maybe a little less in control of your calendar. I'm sure people have different thoughts about that, but there's a lot of different ways you can go. As far as accommodations are concerned, I don't use that many, or rather I haven't. I have interesting stories to tell about requesting, fixes in our office bathroom, which was a little weird. And probably more recently, I've been, like a lot of other folks, looking for exceptions to some of the return to office policies. And so there are some stuff like that, but as a general matter, I'm super fortunate not to have needed a ton of things so far. So there you go.
This is Marissa. Thank you. Kevin, were you next?
Yes. Thanks. So I can speak to this from a few different lenses. For my work, because I do employment law, I am regularly touched by disability through accommodations and whatnot under the ADA. So I very regularly think about disability and how disabled employees navigate and work, as well as how customers with disabilities interface with our product and compliance issues from that front. As a person with a disability, it would be impossible to not have some sort of bias towards that effort. However, as an attorney, we all have to remember that we are there to fight for our clients' needs and desires. I will say, going in-house, that fight is a lot easier in my head because I chose to work at a very inclusive company that really prides itself on diversity and inclusion efforts. So it's not much of a challenge to say, hey, we should consider this sort of accommodation, or why is the business thinking one way when they should be thinking the other way. When I was working at my law firm, it was more of a mystery, if you will. I would give the advice, cross my fingers, and hope that they took it. And then if I didn't hear from them for a while, then maybe they did. If I heard from them a few months later, hey, we got sued, then I guess they didn't take it. So we have to take it to the next level and defend the case because that's the job. I never let my disability dictate whether or not I could be a defense attorney, because I think that you can be anything you want with a disability. You don't have to just do one side of the attorney world because you have one. And I oftentimes would even depose disabled people, but I really believe in the rule of law, and I really try to get to the facts to understand the root cause. One really interesting challenge, burden, and also privilege is that because I have a disability, when I speak to my clients about wrongs that I perceive or issues that I think are actually valid, I am very lucky to say that my clients have universally listened. They know that they're spending a lot of money to talk to me. So why would they not take the opportunity to listen to the things I have to say to help them prevent further issues with whatever situation? In terms of accommodations, I have muscular dystrophy. I have no use of my arms or my legs, and I'm very physically weak. So I do need quite a few accommodations. I use dictation software. I have a special desk. I also have a special camera, microphone. I also have a special phone that connects to my computer, so it's all through the same microphone. I also have a automatic door opener so that my office door can open. Now, when I worked at my firm, I was again pleasantly surprised that any request I needed was pretty much granted immediately because I'm working with employment lawyers. So they know of all people the rights of people like me. And to be very honest with you all, I think it's no secret that there are not a lot of disabled lawyers in defense law as employment lawyers. So it was really a narrow kind of moment, but I had to be honest that we're working in Chicago. I was working at the Willis Tower or the Sears Tower, if you're a native. And I worked at the 80th floor, which takes 2 elevators to get to. And I can't press the button. And I kind of said to the firm, we've got some options. You can pay for a caregiver to stand there. You can hire a secretary to stand there. You can have the security stand there, but whoever has to be there, if you want me to work at this firm, bill the hours you want me to bill, be here 5 days a week with a smile every day, you're going to have to get me up to that office. So we had to come up with a pretty interesting game plan. I had different numbers in my phone of different people that would meet me at different times, depending on what I needed. And it was a little bit tricky at first, but the firm was incredibly open-minded and supportive of my needs, and I'm grateful for that because it really empowered me. And it also was a recognition to myself that putting in the hard work, standing up for yourself, theoretically, not literally in this case, and being able to say what you need to be able to work is really important. I recognize that not every place can do those things, or even would do those things because it does become expensive. But one thing I want to finish on is that I mentioned a lot of accommodations around technology, such as dictation, accessible desk, etc. Today, if you were to ask for those things, such as dictation or a desk that goes up and down by a button, a lot of companies would say that we already provide those things to everyone, whether you're disabled or not. And that's a really refreshing stance on the world that we live. I really like the fact that this notion of inclusive design is taking hold in the hybrid work that we live in, because we really need to continue thinking about not just disabled people, but people with all sort of barriers that they face. Maybe they broke their leg, maybe they're having an issue where they can't get up for whatever reason. And so these sort of roadblocks that were once there, I think, are being lifted by the totality of circumstances that kind of help effectively create more inclusive environments.
Thank you. Marissa?
Well, first of all, I went first and I didn't describe myself. So I am a white woman with long silver hair and dark glasses. And I'm wearing a sundress because it's really hot here, even with the air conditioning on. So, God, I'm sorry, it's late for me. So the question is, we mixed up two questions, one about accommodations and one about how my disability influences my work. So let me answer the influences my work.
Yes.
So I have had vision problems all my life, and they have been, I've had recently I've had surgery, I've had medication, so my vision is different than it was before. And so I think that the way it influences me is not always conscious, but it's been conscious more recently in terms of me just understanding what my own limitations are. For example, I can't stare at a screen on video for long periods of time. It gives, it's something that my vision doesn't allow. And so I think that part of what I've learned is that I'm a really good listener. And I used to always think it was because, I started as a social worker and that's what makes me a good listener. But I think part of what made me a good listener is that I couldn't read as well as others with a vision problem. And there weren't always the way, if I'm reading a contract on the screen, that I can always follow it, that I can see it, that I don't get lost in the document or it doesn't become double for me, which sometimes happens. So as a result of that, I've become a really good listener and able to help and solve problems, especially within operations, and give advice from a verbal perspective. And I think I'm only first really recognizing that in itself has been what I've done really well. But I think that I've also supported, that's how I know Sudha, digital accessibility. And that's been really, I always, I took a training today and I'm always jotting notes about how it could be better. Oh, the closed caption didn't work here, or I had to scroll down to get to certain spaces and that wasn't intuitive. So I always think I'm always looking at those things from a digital accessibility perspective, from that perspective of my own vision issues, but also like in everybody else that I know. So that's how my disability has influenced my work.
So, Marissa, thank you so much. And you're right, it does, we did kind of get a little bit to the next question, which is, have you ever had to navigate accommodations processes or encountered ableism in your in-house role? Um, I don't know. I know Kevin and Stuart started a little bit and talked a little bit about their accommodations. Not sure if y'all have anything else to add, or Sudha and Morissa. I don't know if you have anything for that question.
I can try to add a bit more, just to the sense that kind of what Marissa was saying about her own kind of superpower, I put it, with, having vision challenges, making, a better listener. For me, I have no ability to use my hands, so I can't really be a disorganized person, which is a benefit if you're a lawyer, because you need to be very organized when keeping bills, etc. But I think in terms of this overall notion of accommodations and ableism, it definitely exists. I'm very grateful for my career, and I don't think it's a fault of a business, but there are people throughout my career, especially, like I mentioned, when entering firms, courtrooms, etc., the logistics around physical access were much more than symbolic. For me, they were like literal hurdles. It's kind of funny because when I was a junior attorney, I remember my first motion, we argued a motion to dismiss. I had worked very hard, like all junior attorneys, to understand the case and the facts at hand. My colleagues at the time, my fellow junior attorneys, they were very busy trying to understand the case and whatnot. And what I was doing was I was actually at the courthouse with my caregiver trying to figure out the entry, because that was where I was worried. I had no issue with the motion. I wasn't even thinking about that. I was worried about, do they have a microphone? Am I going to be able to be in front of this judge? Are they going to be able to see me and hear me speak? So I think it's kind of interesting because it forces us at times to be so vigilant and efficient, right? I don't really have time to think about and kind of get frenetic about this motion. I've got to just know the facts because I've got bigger issues. I can't even get through the damn door. Like literally, I can't get in. So that's where, well, practicing in federal court really helps. State court in the middle of Illinois is just a crapshoot. But, knowing the ins and outs and understanding those hurdles can really help challenge those issues. And I'll just close with saying that when I do interviews and whatnot, I actually always led with my disability. I think that there's maybe a mixed school of thought about whether or not to disclose disability early on. I know mine is not hidden, right? I know another panelist, Sudha, mentioned hers is hidden. Mine is not. You know it the minute you see me. So I figure you're going to need to know it right away, so let's just get it over with. And what I do is I always put my memberships. I was a member of the American Association of People with Disabilities. I was a member of the National Association of Law Students with Disabilities. I made that very clear. And what I would do is I would always start these interviews by kind of weaving it in casually. Like, oh yeah, I write briefs all the time. I use dictation software. So that way the interviewer who is staring at my hands that don't work, and I know they're thinking, how the hell does he type? I already answered it for them. So I'm kind of taking everything off the table for them to make it easier for them to go in my favor. And that's kind of how I practice law. For a judge, whenever you write a brief or a motion, you want to make it so straightforward for the judge that they don't really need to think about it. And that's how I kind of look at it. And I think that while ableism does exist, you can really redirect it by modeling confidence and clarity.
This is Marissa. That's fantastic. Okay, so I see everyone kind of came off mute. Sudha, you just raised your hand, so I'm gonna go to you, and then whoever wants to go.
Thank you. I was gonna say, I have not needed to go through a formal accommodations process. Just there are certain kind of accommodations I might need if I were in a different environment, but it just hasn't kind of come up. But I was going to kind of echo what Kevin says and say in terms of the second part of the question about ableism in the workplace. I don't think I haven't experienced, well, arguably I did have an experience with it earlier in my career, but we won't get into that. What I was going to say instead is that I think Kevin hit on so many good points. And as I said earlier, because I have invisible disabilities, I can play this kind of stealth role sometimes. And what I have seen in our society all over the place is what I always think of as a failure of imagination, where someone will think to themselves, if my hands didn't work the way they worked, or if I couldn't see, or, you know, whatever form that takes, I would be terrified and unable to do basic tasks. And therefore, then a whole series of incorrect assumptions are made that if you feel that way, then obviously other people must be in the same, and they can't visualize how that would all work. And I always think of that, you know, the kindest way to put that is that is a failure of imagination leading to a series of incorrect assumptions. And so I will at times get opportunities to talk with people about how they are failing to have the right amount of imagination. And I'll be able to say, like, hey, actually, our members, patients, employees, whoever we're talking about, they actually can do all these things. They're doing them all right now. And so we have to make sure that we're making that work. Like, that's our job. And, you know, just because you can envision this doesn't mean it's not happening. And I think Kevin put that so well. Or I remember back when I was in undergrad, I did an undergrad honors thesis and I applied for a grant and I got it. I remember my professor saying to me, you only get grants when the people giving you the money can really visualize exactly what, like, they can picture in their mind what you're going to do if you get the money in this concrete way. And if they can do that, they might give you the money. And if they can't, they won't. And I feel like it's the same kind of thing, Kevin, that you were hitting on, is how can you kind of apply that logic when you're job hunting. And if you go through interviews and then whoever you're interviewing with or working with or whatever can picture how this is all going to work, then their imagination will kick in and then things are workable versus, you know, I think all of that really hangs together. So I have kind of had that sort of experience, and I'm always looking for those opportunities to educate people on what is possible.
Thank you. Stuart, did you want to go?
Yeah, I just wanted to try to touch on a few things briefly. One, just to respond to something that Kevin had said earlier about in-house versus law firm and willingness to accommodate. One thing, especially for those of us who are thinking about what direction you want to go, my personal experience is that at a law firm, there are built-in supports that don't exist in-house. Now within a law firm, you are a profit center. You are the engine that drives the economics of the firm. You therefore have administrative assistants, you have secretaries, you have other folks who are going to help with your expenses, track your CLE credits, do a variety of things for you, depending on the kind of law firm you work for. When I went in-house, and it's great not to have billable hours, by the way, wonderful not to have a business development plan, I love it. But they basically throw a computer, tell you to figure out how to log on, and you're kind of on your own. So, you know, you just want to balance how you feel about that. as far as ableism, there's a few things. One, when I was a young attorney, I was doing a big deal, and the lead partner asked me about, how I dealt with my hearing issues, and I thought I was being pretty open. I'm like, I let people know in advance so they're comfortable with it, and they're not offended if I ask it, ask them to repeat a question. And he was alarmed that I would tell them that I would repeat a question and not understand something. He was concerned that they would think I was essentially double billing them. And I was simply too young to kind of have a thought through response, but that sort of gives you an idea. Another thing, not with the firm, but I did a lot of diversity work with the Washington State Bar Association. And one of the things that we did was work on their 2012 membership survey. And so they were going to, it was a membership survey. It was really a retention survey, trying to figure out why marginalized people left the profession. And so they were going to include people with disability for the first time. For other minority groups, race and gender and whatnot, they asked a variety of typical questions about access to mentorship, access to opportunities, promotion of velocity, all sorts of things that are sort of the bread and butter of the statistics that go along with D&I. For people with disabilities, they only asked 3 things, which I thought said a lot about how the profession had not yet come to terms. They said, A, do you have a disability as defined in, and they cited that portion of the ADA. I'm not an ADA attorney, I have no idea, but I bet it scared a lot of people off. Second, they asked, have you ever requested an accommodation? Fair point. And then, has that accommodation ever been granted? And that was the sum total of what they planned to ask people with disabilities about their experience in the law. And our blunt feedback was, A, you need to talk about disabling conditions in a broader way. Secondly, all of the questions you're asking other marginalized people apply to us just as well. To me, that is the real issue of disability inclusion in the legal profession. One of the things that was striking about that result, and you will see figures from all these other, a couple other bar associations, usually the figures for representation in law firms can often be sub 1%. I think the highest I've seen in some of the bar stuff is maybe 7%. The result in Washington, after we changed all those questions, 21%, orders of magnitude bigger than anything that's been seen before. Secondly, we had I may get this in reverse. I think it's like the second highest frequency of career barriers, and the first highest in sort of the intensity of those barriers. Said a lot, but it all has, getting those results started with changing the mindset, which, comes from an ableist or rather, disability ignorant perspective. So there you go.
This is Marissa. Thank you. Just flagging for everyone, we have about 10 minutes left, and I have one more question that I want to ask all the panelists. Marissa, did you want to add something?
No, I want to answer the question that you're going to ask.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so one more question I have for all the panelists. Just want to flag that we're so glad everybody was able to join us today. I just put in the chat a link to our website, NDLPA.org, and you can join at that link if you're not already a member. There's also a ton of resources and other information on our website. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to info, INFO, at NDLPA, NDLPA.org. And I'm going to kick off this last question for our panelists, which is, what advice do you have for disabled legal professionals who are looking for in-house employment? And I'll kick it off with Marissa.
So the first thing I'm going to say is just go for it. I think that you just have to put yourself out there, and that your disability is not your entire identity. So finding what that asset is and just showing your confidence in that. As you know, like Kevin, I loved what you said about, you just say, oh, and I use I use this software and that's how I write my briefs. I think that it's important to just show your assets, and be confident and go ahead and try. And I think that's really important. I think a lot of times I've seen where attorneys are like, well, I just have no idea. Well, what would they need? And I think that especially in operations, there is such a great need for operations attorneys. Like just go apply and put it out there and show what your skills are. And I do think, as somebody with a disability, that I think in a different way sometimes, and I've learned to be creative in my thought process. I think outside of the box, and if I don't advise my clients in, this is the law, this is what you have to do. I advise my clients on, this is the law, let's figure out how to get there. And I think that comes from my background of always trying to figure out for myself and not admitting that, oh, I have a disability. I obviously do, but I think it's taken a lot of years for me to say the words. But I think that that's the mechanism in which I think is that let's find a way to do this, do it correctly, and really get in there with my clients to figure something out.
Thank you. Amazing. This is Marissa. Who's next?
I can go. This is Kevin. I think the main thing, like I mentioned earlier, is take control of your own narrative. Like we've been saying, when you manage your expectations, by sharing how you work, etc., the conversation centers on solutions, not surprises. I think that's what I worked for a very powerful attorney partner who most associates were very afraid of. Some even quit just because of their presence, seriously. And I worked for him because I liked the challenge, and I also respected that he was like Stuart said, a moneymaker for the firm. And so I knew that was a bandwagon to get on. And what I was able to get on his good side, if you call it, is to bring him solutions, not surprises. I knew the answer to everything he would ask before he asked it, because that's how you have to work. I mean, it isn't easy being an attorney, period. And when you have a disability, we know it's that much harder. So you need to kind of be prepared. I also think you should research your benefits carefully. I think if you rely on Medicaid buy-in programs, understanding how your income limits can interact with employment and caregiver support. Government jobs often have better caregiver accommodations. Just because it's a big company doesn't mean they're going to give more money for caregivers. So think about that. I also think it's important to advocate early about accessibility and accommodations. I often wanted to visit for offices in advance. We had orientation. I wanted my own orientation. I wanted a private tour for just me of everything, the bathroom, the kitchen. And, they'd often say, oh, you're going to get it Monday with everyone. No, I need my own. I need my own because I have different needs. And finally, I think you should build resilience for no. Oftentimes, we hear no, but no is actually one step closer to yes, right? I mean, my disability personally is muscular dystrophy, which my life expectancy is only 2 years old. So if that taught me anything, it's live with urgency and grit, because that no really fuels your journey to the next step. So you can do it. There's ways to do it.
Thank you. Stuart?
Yeah, 3 things for you guys. Number 1, find a fit that's right for you. Not all in-house positions are the same. Large, small, rural, not rural, suburban, you name it. Find a fit that's right for you. Second, you can now look for disability-friendly environments, right? So Disability In and other places will rate and talk about work environments for people with disabilities, and large companies, which of course will have legal departments. And probably more importantly than that is the network that you're building right here by attending this panel, et cetera, and what NDLPA is all about. Finding other people that can tell you about places that are good to work and what to watch out for. Third thing is, don't forget to go on the offensive. And I think it's such a dumb thing that Kevin and Marissa have already talked about. Oftentimes, when I've gone to other panels for law students with disabilities and stuff like that, there's a tendency to focus on defensive issues. Now, how am I going to pass the LSAT? How am I going to do the bar exam? How am I going to ask for accommodations? When should I disclose? And it's a very, protecting your vulnerabilities. And I get that. And it is important. Law is a freaking competitive area. You have to show that the whole community is loaded with untapped talent, really good stuff for a host and variety of reasons. When you start to step out, don't forget, to go on the defensive, to show what you can do, to put on your A game. And, all those other things are important, but you got to bring the whole package. And, like I say, we have one of the most fantastic group of folks to get in this field, and it is so tailor-made for us in so many ways. If you guys can all go really far.
And this is Marissa, last but not least. Sudha, want to close us out?
Thanks. Sure. I would echo everything everyone has said and maybe bring it together to say I am a person on the call who does hire people and lead, on a regular basis, lead a team. And I would say from that perspective, obviously we follow all fair hiring practices, but my team has a ton of people with disabilities on it. And I can say as a leader that not to oversimplify, but people with disabilities almost always have superpowers. Everyone on this panel, anyone who's made it as far in their career to be attending this right now, if you have a disability and you were able to get through law school, you have superpowers around creative problem solving, around grit, around persistence, around resilience, all the things that the other panelists have illustrated so beautifully. They're illustrating those superpowers. You have them too. And so it's just a question of figuring out what does that mean for you, and then what's the story that goes along with that. But you may have much bigger edge than a lot of other people who haven't had to be a creative problem solver every day to succeed. And so I would say what everyone else has said, which is really believe in that. Just look for how that comes to life for you, because I guarantee that it does, or you wouldn't be here right now.
This is Marissa. Thank you all so much for joining us. We're so we're so grateful to have been blessed by this fantastic panel. And again, if you have questions or want to reach out, feel free to visit ndlpa.org or email us at info@ndlpa.org. I hope you all have a great night, and thanks again for joining us. Bye, everybody.